Hey guys, this is Murad for Homeschool, and I'm gonna jump straight into this AQA GCSE Psychology series. Just a quick side note to begin with. I know that there might be some buzzing in the background of in the audio, and I'm gonna try and get that fixed for later episodes. But for now, you're just gonna ignore it. So yeah, let's get straight into the video. We're going to start off by talking about memory, which is the first topic of Unit 1 of Psychology. And for this first episode, we're going to look at the models of memory, and we're going to introduce the models of memory. There are three models of memory you need to know. Those are the MSM, the LOP, and the REC. So starting from the top, the MSM, or the multi-store model of memory, is the idea that memory passes through a series of memory stores, of which there are three. These are the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. So we'll start with the sensory memory, which is the first step with the first store. The information is stored in. And so it enters through the sensory receptor. And a sensory receptor is basically any organ that can pick up one of your senses. So we're talking about the eyes. You can talk about the ears as well. And so information, and if we're using the eye as the example, then information comes in the form of light, is picked up by the sensory receptor and stored in the sensory memory. And that's how information enters our sensory memory. The capacity of the sensory memory is only a few items, and it has a very, very short duration of under a second. All you need to know is that it's under a second. If you want to be more precise, it's between 250 to 500 milliseconds. So between a quarter and a half of a second. If you didn't know, the capacity refers to how many pieces of information, how many items of information can be stored in each in the store, in the storage at a given time, and the duration refers to how long each item of information can stay in the memory store. Also, just another side note is that I'll be using this blue circle to represent sensory memory in diagrams in the future if I need to. So just remember that the blue circle is the sensory memory. So here we go on to the next step, the short-term memory. So information from the sensory memory needs to be encoded into a format that can be understood by the short-term memory and then transferred to the short-term memory, which is represented by this purple diamond. However, this process of encoding and storage is only true for information in the sensory memory we pay attention to. And due to the short duration of the sensory memory, information is constantly coming in and going out, and therefore a good amount of information is ignored and therefore forgotten. And so that's how memory enters our short-term memory. The short-term memory has a capacity of between 5 and 9 items. However, there's a preference at around 7 items. So what we say is that there is a 7 plus or minus 2 capacity and a duration of under a minute. But if you want to be very precise, it's between 0 and 18 seconds. And so that's that for the short-term memory. Moving on to our final memory store, the long-term memory. Information in the short-term memory is gone over multiple times in a process we know as rehearsal. And the easy way to remember rehearsal is when you think about a school play or a play. The actors would go over their lines and their parts multiple times until they know it perfectly, and that's what you're doing, is you're going over information in your mind, and once you have rehearsed information sufficiently, it is transferred to your long-term memory, which is represented by this large red octagon. Information that you don't rehearse sufficiently is forgotten. And so the long-term memory has a capacity that is potentially unlimited and a duration that is potentially forever. And so what this means is once information is stored in your long-term memory, you won't forget it unless you go through certain circumstances, which we will talk about in a later episode. So that's basically it for long-term memory. All you need to remember is that it's got a basically infinite capacity and duration. And so that's that for the long-term memory, and those are all the stores. So here's a little diagram that you might want to note down. It shows you all three stores of memory and how information moves between them. I'm going to put a link to this slideshow. It's not a PowerPoint. It's to the slideshow in the description, and I'll be doing that for all the slideshows that I make for future episodes as well. So if you want to find the slideshow, it will be in the description, so you can make use of it. That's it for the multi-store model. So moving on to the LOP, also known as the levels of processing theory. And what this theory suggests is that it is the way we process and think about information that allows us to recall it later or makes us forget it. So there are two levels of processing. There's shallow processing and deep processing. I apologize for my inability to pronounce the word processing. That one, the long one that starts with a P. And so what this theory suggests is that the deeper you process information, the easier it is for you to recall it at a later point. So let's start off by talking about shallow processing, which comes in two forms. The shallowest form of processing is structural processing, which is when you look at the physical properties of an object. Just another note, which is important, is when we talk about all this, remembering, we usually talk about how we remember words, and this will make more sense when we look at all the different studies. But when it comes to words and structural processing, it's looking at things like the capitalization and the font and how the word actually just looks. The next level up is known as auditory processing. This is less shallow, so it could also be called like medium processing, and it's basically when you look at the sound given off by an object. And when it comes to words, we use this in reference to how the word sounds, what does it rhyme with, things like that. And then the deepest form of processing is known as semantic processing. And what semantic processing does is it looks at the meaning of an object. What is its purpose? What is it made up of? And basically, semantic processing is just understanding the object or the word, and that is the deepest form of processing. And that's it for levels of processing. All you need to know are those three different forms of processing. And I'm going to stop saying that word now. And then moving on to the final model of memory, the RAC, which actually isn't a initialism like the others. It's an abbreviation that I made up. It's not actually very common at all. I don't think I've ever read it anywhere. I just made it for this video because I'd rather have 3 letters than a whole word. MSM and LP are commonly used abbreviations. And on that point, another side note, if you can avoid using the abbreviations in your answers during exams, if you feel like it's too much of a hassle or you don't have enough time to write out the whole term every time you need to, a good format is to start off your answer with something like this, the multi-store model, and then in brackets you put the initialism is, and then from that point on in that answer you can just refer to it as the MSM. I don't know if you'd lose marks for it, but personally I just find it kind of sloppy. So moving on to the RAC, which is short for the reconstructive approach to memory. And in my opinion, this is probably the hardest one to actually understand. But I'll try and make it as simple as I can. So what the what the reconstructive approach says is that memory isn't a stored copy of facts, and memories are created using a combination of new information and information we already know. So what this basically means is the memories that we store, that we think are the honest representations of what has actually happened, is actually a mixture of what has actually happened and what we think should have happened. And this is done through the use of mental schemas. And what are schemas? According to Wikipedia, a schema is an organized pattern of thought or behavior that organizes categories of information and the relationships among them. These are a lot of big words, and if you can understand them, congratulations, but I frankly don't. So the way that I remember schemas are as situational stereotypes. Um, People also refer to them as mental building blocks. But what I say when I mean situational stereotype is that a stereotype is, as you know, an oversimplified belief about the traits of a person based on a group they are a part of. So like race or gender or something like that. And so what a schema is, it's similar to a stereotype, except instead of looking at the traits of a person, it looks at the traits of a situation. And rather than basing it off the group, it's based off the nature of the situation. And so a good example of this is if you look at birthday parties. And so I just went on Google and I quickly Googled birthday party, and this image came up in one of the top results. And so this is a perfect example of a mental schema. It has all these things you would expect to see at a children's birthday party: cakes and drinks and a clown and party hats and balloons and streamers and a big happy birthday sign and blowing out the candles. And so these are schemas what you would expect to see at a birthday party. And so the reconstructive approach says that when we look into our memories, we find that most, like if we look into our memories of our birthday parties or birthday parties we've been to, more or less we would see most of these items in our memories. However, there is a chance that some of these items were not there and you added them yourself because it's just in your mind common knowledge that there should be these things at birthday parties. And so what the reconstructive approach says is that we use these schemas to help us make sense of real events that we don't understand or we don't fully understand. And that's that for the reconstructive. So here are a couple keywords. They all relate to the multi-store model, but these are some good keywords you should know. Encoding, which is changing information from one format to another so that it can be stored. Storage, which is holding information in the memory system, any memory system. Retrieval, which is recovering information from storage. This is more to do with moving information from the long-term memory back into the short-term memory. And we would do that because it's easier to recall information in the short-term memory. And so rather than try and recall it from the long-term memory, we transfer it first and then we recall it. And rehearsal, which is going over pieces of information stored in the short-term memory so it can be transferred into the long-term memory. And that's it for this first episode on the models of memory. Next episode we're going to go into the studies relating to each model. And then from there we're going to go on to evaluation points for these models. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments or send me a message on Twitter and I will try to answer them. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our subreddit. Well, we'll keep everything updated on these areas so you know when new videos come out. We expect to do a lot of cool things in the future. So stay updated on the subreddit and here. And so yeah, that's basically it. I'm gonna try and get as many videos out as I can as often as possible. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Stay tuned for more videos. If you have any suggestions for videos I should focus on later, please send them to me. And if you have any suggestions for our other homeschool tutors, also send those to me or to the subreddit. If you have any suggestions for subjects and exam boards we should be focusing on, I would take those too. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more.